10:04. I think we'll get started. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to day 5 of the inaugural Northeast InsurTech Week. This is the final day of the week-long summit that proud to say was formed with 4 other terrific partners: NASA, InsurTech New York, InsurTech Hartford, and Innovation Underwriters. The 5 companies got together to really see what we could do to address some of the gaps in knowledge and the lack of being able to convene in person. And so we put the 5 organizations together to form the Northeast InsurTech Alliance and really brainstormed around themes that we could bring to the industry and really kind of combine ecosystems in the Northeast. And so it's been a terrific week. For some of you that have joined some of the other sessions, you've probably seen that and heard some really great perspective from regulators, carriers, InsurTechs, as well as thought leaders and even professors from places like MIT. So really want to thank my partners in this effort, and we're looking forward to doing more of these sessions and more to come. By the way, I'm Jennifer Byrne, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Quesnay, one of the 5 members of this alliance. And I want to welcome you to today's event. We are very proud to feature 3 terrific female founders and to really learn about their journeys and their perspective in not only founding and running companies, but really overcoming a series of obstacles and how they've gone about that. So I'm really excited to have a very interactive conversation with all of you. And before I turn it over to my co-moderator and panel, I do want to just say a couple words about Quesnay and who we are for those that don't know us. We are an 8-year-old company. We're set up to really bridge the gap between large corporations and startups to really advance innovation in insurance and finance and in mobility as well. We in particular run global innovation competitions as one methodology to bring startups into large corporations in a methodical, efficient way. Over the last 4 years, we've been running a program called Female Founders in FinTech, as well as in InsurTech. And we've seen some terrific outcomes by really bridging both the innovation gap as well as addressing the lack of diversity in both tech and in the insurance industry. So it's very timely that we're hosting this event because it just so happens that our Female Founders in InsurTech Innovation Competition and Mentorship Program is now live and accepting applications until July 26th. We can put the link to the application location, the website in the chat box. So if anyone's interested, they can either apply or get involved or even think of someone who may want to apply that's a women-led startup in insurance. And I do want to also thank a number of our ambassadors to the program who have really done a terrific job of really spreading the word on a global level. Of course, we've got a lot of terrific applicants coming in from the Northeast, but we're just really delighted to see the entrants coming in from places in Africa and LATAM and Asia and Europe and the UK. And one of our ambassadors is joining us today, so we'll probably get some good questions from Tunde from Africa InsurTech Rising. Just a couple of other points and part of sort of the backdrop for why we chose the founder journey topic for today is that it may not surprise many of you, but we have a gap in diversity in the insurance industry, both on the incumbent side as well as in the tech community. And what's fascinating is that 61% of the workforce in insurance is female, and only about 11% are named officers or C-suite or on boards. And so we know that there's a gap there. And I think conversations like these will help us, I hope, drive the conversation to really see what we can do to address that. And at the same time, only 2.8% of venture capital funding goes to women-led startups. In insurance, and looking back at the Crunchbase numbers of late, There were 262 InsurTech investments, and about 11 went to female-led InsurTech, so that's about 4.2%. So clearly, you know, there's a serious challenge here, and some of these women that you will hear from today are really doing a terrific job of moving those numbers, and we want to do more as an ecosystem. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Kate Smith, the managing editor at AM Best. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us today and supporting the event and for the terrific interview that we did with AM Best TV. So thank you for that. I'd like to also introduce our panelists, Sudha Meghan, the CEO of Rozie.AI, Margaret Spence, the president and CEO at C. Douglas and Associates, and Carey Nadeau, the founder and CEO of Ometry. So in terms of the agenda, what I'd like to do is invite each one of our panelists to really introduce themselves, provide their background, a little bit of their journey and perspective, and then Kate and I will get into a panel discussion, and we really truly want to make this interactive. We have terrific stories that you're about to hear, and we really want the audience to take something away, whether you're a carrier, you're a regulator, you're an aspiring InsurTech, or current InsurTech. I think you're going to learn a lot. So with that, I would love to invite Sudha Meghan, CEO of Rozie.AI, to kick it off and share your introduction, a little bit of your background.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer, and I appreciate the opportunity to have this time with all of you today around the globe, it looks like, and also want to thank the Northeast InsurTech and the Quesnay groups for bridging together and creating this production of sorts. My background lies in neuroscience and psychology research, and a few years ago, I was very fascinated with the idea of being able to bridge people with the information, the resources that they need to be able to make better decisions, to be able to serve others in their roles. And my background at the time, I was engaged in hospital care and looking at it from the lens of medicine and looking after a patient or being able to serve in that capacity. So recognizing that the resources that many individuals, whether it was the health insurance agent that picks up the phone or the individual that is communicating at the bedside, being able to recognize that there is a wealth of knowledge and information and empathy that can be provided at those most vulnerable moments. How do you scale this? How do you personalize these interactions and make it accessible to the masses, so to speak? Our firm's foray into insurance has been kicked off by the ecosystem in Hartford, thanks to the NASRE partnership, as well as other organizations that we've been able to work with and work alongside. And insurance is a very unique market in that we are looking at the economics of risk aversion and also interfacing with people at some of their most vulnerable times, whether this is personal insurance, small businesses, as we see in our economic climate today. And we definitely recognize the differentiating aspects that insurance organizations have to be able to deliver individualized care, customer engagement, sales interactions. So essentially across the customer journey, Rozie is founded on the principle of being able to remember an individual so that each time they reach out, they don't have to keep repeating their narrative. And that enables the organization to deliver more proactive offerings, to be more intuitive, and apply that memory in an engaging and nurturing manner to build customer loyalty. Some of the ways that we have been engaging during some of the events that have transcended our world, whether it is the COVID-19 pandemic or as well as the social justice movements that have gained traction around the world, is being able to provide a showcase so that individuals can triage and understand how the current climate, whether it is public health guidelines on business, and how that influences the policyholders from a health insurance standpoint, from a small commercial standpoint, and from a personal insurance standpoint. So being able to provide that advisory and information, again, at an incredibly critical time in our lives. We are an organization committed to partnering with companies and groups that are looking to extend and grow in this digital experience space. And we're incredibly passionate about making a world where we're creating AI with empathy, so to speak. So looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Sudha. Thanks again for being here. And we're going to dive in with a lot of questions in a few minutes. From here, I would love to turn it over to Margaret Spence, the president and CEO of C. Douglas and Associates, and learn about her journey and background.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jennifer. This has been an interesting journey to get to this webinar, and it's the power of LinkedIn. So let's go there. It is the absolute power of LinkedIn, and so I'm really happy to be here today. So I have been in the insurance world for 36 years, and I gauge that by my oldest son is 35. I started in the industry a year before he was born. And I've meandered through the industry in various ways. I started in health insurance. I was a regional claims manager in California for a company that is now a part of CNA during the consolidation years ago. I worked in HMO under provider management. I worked in provider contracting. I was a regional claims manager for Humana at one point. I've done Humana customer service. I then switched over to workers' comp just before my younger son was born, and went into the workers' comp area because everything I had learned in health insurance was applicable to what was going on in workers' comp. And at the time, it was a pretty volatile market. I'm located here in Florida. I started my career in California. And the insurance marketplace was pretty volatile here for workers' comp, and there was a lot of legal inactions. And so I felt pretty empowered to go into an area that was not as stagnant as the area that I had been in. I mean, we were fighting for HMOs back in the early 80s. Now we're fighting for injured employees' rights and injured employees' access to care. So I became a workers' comp adjuster. I managed one of the 5th largest school districts in the country. I was one of my accounts. I worked for the district in a dedicated unit, and from there really learned a lot about injured employees being discarded from the workforce. Part of my job as the adjuster was to determine if an injured employee was worthy of going back to work. That's pretty much the highlight of the position. Does the doctor deem them ready to go back? Does the attorney that they've hired have a hidden agenda to get them back into the workforce? Very little was paid on getting people back into work as whole people, or understanding that their disability was really their ability to work. So when I left the adjuster desk, I really started focusing on injury management, return to work. How do we get injured employees back to work? So about 12 years ago, I wrote the first book on injured employees and navigating how injured employees can get back into the workforce. The book was called From Workers' Comp Claimant to Valued Employee. And I pretty much navigated and laid the groundwork for putting proactive injury management processes in place for employers. As I expanded that into my own consulting practice, and I've been running my company now for 21 years, a part of the work that we do is we work with large self-insured employers, and it is first dollar for them. They are usually collateralized very heavily. They have lots of financial stake in the game, and we go in to help them soup to nuts from the time they hire the employee to the time the employee ends their service with the company. We work on creating a safe workplace for that employee. Very focused on how do we onboard employees into the system? How do we create work hardening programs around getting them up to speed so that they can work at their highest capacity, but not at the fastest capacity? Because what our research and what the study that we've done with our clients over the last 20 years is that there's a half-life to an employee coming into a job before they get injured. For some of our clients, we work primarily with two industries, which are two that are being affected by COVID-19. We work in healthcare. A lot of the major hospital brands work with us, and we work with agri-vertical business, which is the meat processors. So we went out and picked two places. We shook out all the companies we never worked for. We shook out two industries. That's the two we work in, and then we ended up with the pandemic. Really cute. Anyway, so some of the work that we do is we identify how an employee gets hired, how we onboard them, how we create programs to keep them from being injured. And then we are able to identify body fatigue when an employee gets injured at a certain point during their journey. And then we create for our clients work hardening and work conditioning programs. We team with ergonomists, we team with other kinds of organizations. And our end goal is to reduce their spend in the workers' comp space. One of the things that happened on this journey is that I'm working now with much larger accounts, and I'm working with a lot of C-suite organizations. And generally the person that hires me is the CEO or the CFO or the chief HR officer. What I was beginning to find is that there were no women in that suite that we were in. We would get into that suite, we would be managing a large loss portfolio. Right now, as of yesterday, we were doing some loss portfolio evaluation. We handle about $140 million in losses for our clients, which means that in $140 million, that sounds like, oh my God, it's a lot of money. That could very well be one client with $11 million in losses sitting on their books for 5 or 10 years, because the half-life of workers' comp can be 30, 40 years. An employee can be injured in 1986 and still be on workers' comp today. That's the reality of that industry, of our industry. So from that, I founded the Employee to CEO Project, because I wanted to empower more women, especially in the insurance space, to be able to enter that C-suite levels that we are in, that I don't see, first off, a woman of color, and I don't see women. 99% of my clients are men. I have one client right now that is a woman that has hired us in. So even in healthcare, people assume that there's lots and lots of nurses, but the majority of hospitals are run by men. And the only woman in that C-level suite is generally the VP of HR. So our goal is a triangulation. We go in and we fix one problem, but now we really want to focus on this other side and bring a technology process to that. And so I'm super excited to be on the panel today.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to have a whole range of topics within insurance, InsurTech, and obviously really terrific diverse backgrounds, journeys, and experiences. So taking another angle to the insurance business, I want to introduce Carey Nadeau, the founder and CEO of Ometry. So Carey, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Jen. First, just thank you very much for also convening us. I think COVID-19 has had the effect of canceling all of the conferences where we would interact with other female founders and share, what's worked, where our struggles are, and how we can support each other. So I really appreciate you bringing the founders together as well, in addition to the VCs and prospective clients and everyone on the line today. So I appreciate that greatly, Jen. Thank you. So at Ometry, what we do is actually bring together a really great team of city planners, statisticians, data scientists, and we try to understand something that we think is really important. Why today, when we have all of the safety features in vehicles, from seatbelts to onboard sensors that can detect if you're about to hit a car in front of you, and all of the devices in vehicles that are tracking driver behaviors, like whether you're speeding or you're hard braking. Why, despite all of those technological advances, car crashes are happening more now than ever. And the fatality rate, actually, how often those crashes are fatal, is also on the rise. So what Ometry did was bring together data from across the country, from millions of records of police crash reports in all 50 states. And we brought together a really great team of people doing machine learning to predict and anticipate where crashes are likely to happen before they happen. Turns out it's something we can know with a lot of data and those sophisticated technologies. We're able to reveal where, in particular, drivers like you or I, or kids going to high school eventually again, or commercial drivers who may be delivering packages, where they're particularly exposed on the road, where they're likely to be involved in a crash. And we think this is a really important thing to bring to the insurance industry in particular, because auto insurance is a big space, about $270 billion in premiums every year. The rating factors, or the things we think about when we price auto insurance, really haven't changed in quite some time. And what we're observing in auto being not a very profitable line for most insurance carriers, that maybe the measures that underpin how we're pricing insurance also have some inaccuracies and some baked in bias. Keeping in mind that the way that we rate insurance today is largely at the zip code level, which has its own sort of historical legacy of redlining attached to it. So we see this big opportunity in Ometry right now, particularly during COVID-19, as more folks are demanding usage-based insurance to augment what we know about crash risks and anticipate who might be the most exposed, and really build products that come back to the core of insurance, which is caring for others and making sure we're keeping families safe and making sure that everyone gets back home at the end of the day when they're on the road. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about sort of the products that we're building really meeting today's moment and in a way that is current and informing insurers with data, frankly, that they may not have had access to before now.
Excellent. Thank you, Carey Ann. Fascinating. And I've been seeing a lot of the stats that you've been sharing kind of state by state via LinkedIn. It's unnerving to see the fatality rates, especially when you think, traffic is down and no one's out and about. It's really been eye-opening. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and dive into more of an interactive kind of panel discussion. And again, we do invite our audience to, turn off your mute button, put your question in the chat box. Either way, we'd love to have you involved in the conversation. And what we want to do right now is tee up 3 main topics for the panel. And Kate and I are going to take us through that. The first being, as a founder, you've gone through a lot, and we really want to understand, especially for those that are thinking about founding a company or kind of struggling through the process, we really want to hear from you. Is there a winning formula to being a successful entrepreneur? Why did you get into it? What is the formula? What have you learned? And sort of what can you share in terms of your experience and best practices? And there's a lot we're going to get into, but that's sort of topic number 1. And Kate, feel free to jump in at any moment. Yeah. But with that first question, what's the winning formula? Is there one? And Sudha, if you want to kick it off and get the conversation started, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I was having this conversation earlier with our team, just from the perspective of, making sure that people are continue to be healthy during this time when we're seeing a lot of news on the current market climate as well. One of the key pivotal aspects is definitely a passion and a vision that align. And with Rozie, that has been this theme of how can we create customer experiences, whether they are on the phone or via chat web experiences that meet people where they are, understand the person, understand their language, how they might be speaking, and match that colloquial speech, that colloquial connection to the formal knowledge that sits. And that equalizes the playing field. So for us, that has been the vision and the mission from this point of everyone should have access to these resources. Yes, you can definitely have different offerings for someone who has a legacy relationship with an organization, but being able to drive and scale that personalized interaction and optimize each individual customer relationship. So that's, I think, a very pivotal pillar in starting an organization and leading an organization and building that team and sourcing the best resources in terms of partners and individuals. The second I would definitely also say is perseverance. And this comes from not only the energy and the incentive and the initiative to keep trucking, so to speak, but also being able to have that perspective, that very conscious foresight and hindsight to be able to evaluate the current market, to be able to evaluate, the individuals that we engage with that are our potential partners and clients, and be very intentional about our relationships, about our engagements, and so to persevere with perspective, so to speak. And then I think the third is definitely, the team and the entities and individuals that you surround yourself with, whether that is the team that you build and nurture in a very individual level, but also the advisors, the partners from a corporate standpoint that you work with and look into building that future ground. One of the very pivotal aspects of Rozie we recognize is being able to understand which industry partnerships are able to leverage and showcase our technology and our offering across the board. And so from that standpoint, we've been able to partner with Microsoft and Amazon to understand the ecosystem that we're in is not siloed. Like, we're all about breaking down the boundaries and the barriers that exist today, whether it's between departments, between the way people speak, between where people are located and how they want to reach out. So to do that effectively takes a village, so to speak, and that village is often at our choosing.
Very true. And if you can share, how do you partner with Microsoft and Amazon to the degree that you can share that?
Absolutely. So we are an official Microsoft Azure partner, and that essentially enables us to leverage the Azure resources that enables us to engage with large enterprises. So this is everything from technology infrastructure to bridging with their existing Azure platform. So this basically makes us a very enterprise-friendly solution that fits into the existing foundation that enterprises leverage. From the Amazon Partner Network standpoint, we're looking at it in terms of how can we connect the digital world, which we often consider to be mobile, web channels, social media, to the traditional 1-800 number, right? Like, that is definitely a continuity of care aspect that we're able to leverage just based on some of those offerings.
So,
yeah,
Sudha, one thing I wanted to ask you is that, from what I've been hearing, COVID-19 kind of kicked the insurance industry 100% into the digital age. Everything had to be, all customer experience, everything had to go digital really quickly. With your company focusing on the experience, have you seen an uptick in interest from the insurance industry, or more of an openness to learn about your offering?
Definitely excited to touch on this. One of the key aspects is that organizations have realized that the market maturity and that climate maturity is now. And so from that standpoint, there has been an overwhelming desire to not lag behind. And so, customer experience as cutting edge and as a competitive differentiator has been on the horizon. Digital engagement and this idea of being able to meet people where they are. Again, these have been ideas and themes, but there has been a significant maturity of decision making, and that enables us to propel and meet with the right people, and also recognize that we realize that just because there is demand, you also need to fit it with an existing legacy technology infrastructure, mindset even, and also culture, right? So from that standpoint, one of the key things that have been very valuable in our conversations is to be able to very clearly share how our approach enables organizations to build on their digital investments and digital engagement iteratively. So what that means is, you can have a claims experience that touches upon the claims journey, and then a separate experience around shopping for new offerings or new coverage. And all of those experiences for an organization through Rozie are threaded together. So if someone then comes and asks a billing question, but they are awaiting a claim, you can proactively provide that claim status during that interaction. So it's a one-stop shop, one-door view. And so organizations are excited, we see, to be able to start small and build. But definitely there has been a directional push towards how to be present on these digital channels and how to truly understand the customer.
So, Carey Ann, what are your secrets for success in scaling up as an InsurTech, by the way, led by a woman, in insurance? Enlighten us. I know, Sudha, you touched upon some really great points, and I want to come back to some of them, but Carey Ann, love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, one of the key things I wanted to highlight, in addition to Sudha's perspective, is this idea that InsurTechs, risk techs, folks coming from outside of the industry have the intention to disrupt or dismantle or somehow undercut what has been 200 years of a legacy of insurance. And I think that, as if I can call myself a successful entrepreneur, we're always growing and building, but I think that, rethinking that, reorienting InsurTechs and startups as here to sort of return us back to the core values of insurance and use advanced technologies to, whether that's automate or digitize or introduce machine learning into the processes so that they are more accurate and fair and equitable to more people. I think now's the moment, because we've seen, to Sudha's point, about decision makers really starting to make decisions. The culture is still there. The sort of legacy of traditionalism is still there. But decision makers are really coming to the table now to say, I'm ready to look at my business and understand how it will respond to the new normal, how it will operate, and how it will thrive in the new normal. And InsurTechs are a great place to look, or risk techs, as we like to call ourselves. We don't sell insurance, we sell data. So a risk technology company can really be available in that moment to hold their hands, because there are plenty of companies out there who are pushing the boundaries on automation and on digitization and on using machine learning in insurance. So it's a real moment, I think, to the point about COVID-19, that we're seeing, let's call it rapid for insurance transformation.
Absolutely. And Margaret, you're 21 years a founder. So tell us what have been the secrets to your success. How have you, overcome quite a few obstacles like we talked about? We'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, so I think, and I want to commend Sudha and Carey. I mean, every time when we first talked, you feel like, you've been in this industry for so long, and I'm, approaching my late 50s, and you go, okay, so who are we handing this to? Who are we giving this to as our next, who's going to shape this industry a little bit more than we have been able to shape it or shake it in the last 30 years or so. And so I'm pretty psyched about both of you and what you guys are doing. So for me, I think when I started my company, and I sort of told you guys this journey before, I didn't really have this clear vision of what I wanted to do. The one goal that I had was I didn't want to work where I was working and what I was doing. That was the first vision. The second part was, let me figure out how I'm going to make this knowledge, this extreme knowledge, because I've literally worked in almost every role in the insurance industry, from underwriting to policy servicing to claims to customer service, provider relations. I've done every single job in a short amount of time, because part of my growth was having this knowledge base that I could pull from. So now when companies come to me and they are struggling through trying to figure out how to integrate their health insurance in with the workers' comp, in with everything else, and creating this cohesive platform for their employees, I can actually speak on all these levels. So the first thing I would say is making a commitment to your foundation. Whether you have the knowledge about the industry or not, it's imperative that if you're going to be a success in this industry, and I was on the InsurTech call yesterday, and I was listening to various different perspectives on that, and I was pretty taken aback. One of them was, don't come to us speaking technology, come to us understanding the industry that you're trying to serve. And I think because there is so much resistance to technology itself, I'll give you an example. For 10 years, we've been trying to get telemed incorporated in the workers' comp system to say the employee doesn't have to every single time go back to the doctor. I have clients who the closest hospital or doctor's office is 5 hours away, and they're still putting people in a car and letting them drive 5 hours to go to a doctor because they didn't want to put telemed in because they just didn't believe in it. Of course, COVID showed up, and everybody's running around calling now today to say, well, you talked to us 5 years ago about telemed. Where's that vendor? Well, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know, because you shot that cannon straight down into the next, planet. We're good. So I think for me, it was always this absolute commitment to my business. People will come in, especially when you're looking at investors and you're looking at people who want to shape the vision of your company because they're giving you money. You can often lose sight of your original commitment to the business. And so I think that is, for me, was the core. When I started talking to people about my business, I had to basically help them see what I was trying to do. And that conversation requires this deep commitment and this deep, unwavering foundation to your core business. Because if you don't feel, if your uncertainty is showing up, then the customer base is going to feel your uncertainty, even though you may not be saying it. You'll use the words that they will then, especially as a woman founder, they'll then pick up on that word and say, yeah, she's not quite ready. So for me, that was it. And then really, for what has made me successful is not feeling that the first thing I came to the world with was what the world needed. My original view of my business was to go out and do investigations of how workers' comp claims happen. I don't even do any of those anymore. As I evolved and as I saw where the trend lines were, I was able to take my experience and my product and my business and ultimately this data that we have now to higher and higher levels as we go in and audit programs and so on. So the analogy that I use is one that my mother taught me really early, which is where you start out is not where you end up. And that is really critical, because sometimes as women founders, or as founders in general, we'll get stuck in the idea, but the world around us is evolving. And so if we get stuck in the idea and the world has evolved beyond us, our business will never be successful.
Yeah, that's a
Margaret,
really
you
good
had strong
point.
credentials before you started your business.
Yes.
In the insurance industry. You had
Yes.
good cred.
Yes.
Did that help in terms of getting people to take this new company seriously?
No, absolutely not. And I told this very shocking story. And so I initially, and I actually told it day before yesterday on a webinar that I did with risk managers. And they were all risk managers in my local area here in Florida, who I had actually knocked on a lot of their doors when I started, and they would not hire me. They basically poo-pooed my business and my business model. And so what I called them out on it and said, part of it is how, the industry contracts work. So if we put out a request for proposal, or we have an idea about what service we want to bring to the table, if the service is geared or packaged together with a bunch of other things, and you're a solo practitioner providing one piece, then you're not able to bid on the whole thing because you can't provide all of the pieces. And so the industry tends to have these systemic blocks that keep women and minorities out because of how they package the product. What I ended up doing, which is shocking in itself, I ended up hiring, because after about 4 years, we couldn't transcend. We just couldn't get business. We couldn't get the kind of business that was going to make me successful and have longevity, that was going to allow the business to grow from one person to more. And so what I ended up doing was hiring a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy to be the face of my company. We grew exponentially after I did that. I took a card that said risk consultant, and I gave him a card that said senior executive. And so we tag teamed the meetings, and a lot of the places that I went into to try to get business, I couldn't get it. So, but when I changed the face of the business, and often people ask me, well, why is the business C. Douglas and Associates? When I initially came out the gate, I realized that if I named the business Margaret Spence Inc., I was never going to get the business. C. Douglas is my mother. She passed away 5 months before I started the company. And so I named the business C. Douglas. My mom's name was Clementine Douglas. And that was the beginning of the visual that I had to create. I had to create a visual that it wasn't a solo practice. I had to create a visual that it wasn't my business. And then eventually I stepped in, even with my years of credentials and having been in the industry and well-educated in the industry, licensed in the industry, well-known in the industry. When I made the transition, I couldn't get business.
Have you ever thought of rebranding it to your own name?
Not at all. No. I think there's still this this process. I mean, I have 3 years in a row, my clients have won the National Underwriter Award for Best in Risk and Work Comp from going through our program 3 years in a row. That is a feat that no one else in the industry has ever had. None of the big 6 brokerage houses have had the success that we've had in managing our clients' loss portfolio. I still get the, tell me about your little business.
Wow.
Even when we have a team of 12, even when we are managing millions of dollars, even when we are being approached by major corporations to handle their losses, I'm still getting that. So it doesn't bother me anymore. I actually spoke at AIG in February. I was in New York, and they invited me to talk to their Black executives, and I did a town hall for them that was broadcast across the country. And I talked about the Career Foundation and how important that was, and how we have to really, as I said, have a commitment to what we want. Because without that commitment, it's not resilience, because I can be resilient at the face of the bricks being thrown at me. I can stand back up. But if I'm not at the core committed to running this business and building this business, then I am going to be shattered by what comes my way, and there will never be resilience. And that for me has been the biggest lesson learned in this journey.
Yeah, and I think the other point really resonates too, which is have passion and conviction, but don't be unaware of your surroundings as the market's moving or as you're getting this feedback, you know, creatively, I mean, horribly having to put, you know, the white male to represent the company, but you did what you had to do to be resilient and to get creative around problem solving. And I've seen that, and I know a number of founders have talked to me about that, even in the venture capital world. So that definitely is probably resonating with lots of folks in this session.
Yeah, and one of the things that I said when we all got together was, I funded my business by cashing in my 401k.
Right.
I took $250,000 out of my 401k and started my company. I didn't have a VC. When I wanted to grow the business, I took out a line of credit on my home, another $250,000 to grow the business. So it's a matter of my leveraging my accounts receivable, my accounts coming in the door. It's about me leveraging my portfolio of my personal assets, because when I went to SBA, when I went to these other organizations, and again, in context, 21 years ago, there wasn't a VC land, you know, like a VC land we exist today. There was a tech bubble back in the 90s. There was all these iterations that ended up becoming the VC land that we have right now. But I'm pretty versed in the VC land because my son, my younger son, ran a tech startup. And I saw how he went through all the iterations of seed funding rounds and all the different things he did to get his funding. So I'm well aware of it, but for me, that was never an option. And so my commitment to my business was that I'm willing to put my own stake in the game. I'm not going to ask somebody else to put a stake in my game first. And that's a different mindset than what is norm.
Absolutely. I wanted to just acknowledge we have a few questions here. For Carey, do you mind summarizing your business model? Telematics is very interesting. Curious how you offer your solution to customers, from Tunde.
Yeah, absolutely. So to bring everybody along, telematics is growing in the personal lines insurance market and commercial lines insurance market. They're devices that you put in your vehicle, either plug them in on your phone, or they're actually on board already. A lot of auto manufacturers and other technologies are being built into the car. Telematics have historically been used to do a few things: to monitor driver behaviors like speeding and hard braking. And when they do that, they implicitly collect data about your location, your GPS location specifically. A lot of consumers are pretty comfortable sharing location information. If you were to open your phone and look at all of the apps that you've given away location information to, I think I have 7 and I'm aware of it. So there are a lot of apps like Google Maps or Instagram that you might have said, yeah, it's cool, take my GPS location for the value and the service that I'm going to get from being able to get from point A to point B or tag my photographs. So what Ometry does is help insurance carriers really leverage that GPS information and extract more value out of knowing where your customers are physically located. Our customers will share with us de-identified GPS information. So we're looking at date, time stamp, XY coordinate, and maybe some behaviors about how the driver's actually driving. We then bring that information to our base map, which scores every single road and predicts which roads are likely to have crashes in the next 30 days. So if you are an Uber driver and you're driving to Union Station in Washington, D.C. to pick someone up from the train station, we're plotting your points along your route and then summarizing how dangerous was this route. How many roads did you go through that had a higher than 50% probability of a crash? How did you behave on those roads? Were you speeding? Were you hard braking? And we help insurance carriers essentially further segment what they look at now to be a homogeneous market. Even usage-based insurance looks predominantly at how many miles you traveled. We all know the same 10 miles aren't necessarily the same. And with more people staying at home, it's this real curiosity about severity spiking. Jen mentioned the number of crashes is going down, but actually the proportion that are fatal has either remained constant, or in some places like Missouri, it's 800% higher than it was this month last year. So really unfortunate but phenomenal numbers that, trust me, I checked maybe 3 or 4 times before publishing. So what we're able to do when we connect the GPS points to the risk map, again, is segment for underwriters so that they can differentiate customers, differentiate price, introduce more accurate pricing, but also engage with the drivers and make telematics a more delightful experience. Nobody likes to be tracked. I don't want to be told, oh, you've been speeding and, you know, wag a finger at me. What I really want to know is, how can I take actions to keep my family safe? How, when I drive on the road, should I be taking exit 12 or should I be taking exit 13? Exit 13 is super dangerous, and that helps me inform the choices that I'm going to make, makes me a better risk for the insurance carrier, and really builds a delightful experience around telematics. So I see another question, so I'll just address it here about coverage. We started in the biggest states to cover as many roads and as many customers as we possibly could. We're now in 42 states across the United States, most of the big insured states. And we have coverage for every single road. When we add a state, we add every road in that state.
So, Carey, and you mentioned the safer roads. You know, if I'm looking on Waze, if I'm using Waze, it tells me the fastest route. I can pick the route with no tolls, whatever. Yeah. Will we get to a point where you can say, okay, here's the statistically your safest route? Will that be an option? I mean, because else how does the driver know?
Yep.
You know, most drivers don't know, oh, this route is not safe. You may say it's got a bad intersection or, you know, lots of traffic, but how do you make them become more aware of what the safer choice is in terms of a road?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of driver engagement opportunities, whether you provide a route in advance or you look at the entire map to be able to understand the context around where you live. We work with a number of applications that deliver that type of information to commercial fleets in particular. So I think there's a lot of applications that can be built on top of the data to inform choices before you take the road. And then after, sort of critically evaluate your performance, right? Like I said, you get a driver score that says, you know, you stink, you're a bad speeder or whatever. Why don't you get a score that tells you, hey, here's where other people were going to hit you? Maybe it's not necessarily all your fault or on you entirely. And where I think that goes, an important sort of prediction for the future or vision for the future about this, is actually back to the underwriters, who at this point are using somewhat, I should just say, very highly aggregated statistics at a zip code level to contextualize, you know, your experiences on the road, but you're not doing UEs in your own zip code. So it sort of masks a lot of really detailed information and hides a lot of the segmentation that can be found within the zip code. But it also importantly does something, instead of rating folks based on where they live, which again has a historical history of redlining. Now we're saying, let's use a much more diversified base unit of analysis. Let's put everybody on the roads. And when you're driving on the roads, you can look to your left and see a Tesla, and you can look to your right and see a broke down Toyota, right? So there's all types of people, all socioeconomics represented, diversity in ethnicity, diversity in why you're on the road to begin with. It could be a school bus, a taxi cab, a commercial vehicle, or your own personal vehicle, all mixed up together. It's really America's melting pot. So if we want to make advances towards really self-reflecting on our own sort of implicit bias that may be baked into the way we operate our business and do the right thing for more consumers, open up more opportunities for more affordable insurance that give access to Black people in particular, you know, access to jobs that may be further afield, or safe places, environmentally safe places to live, or, you know, just higher wage jobs, childcare, et cetera, that require a car. We need to do our part. We need to make sure we're taking care of those families like they're our own. So I think it represents a real opportunity to not only introduce new products for everybody that delight them, but also reach new customers as well in a way that authentically and accurately and fairly rates the risk that they pose on the road.
You know, if I could chime in a second, Carey, your product is actually quite amazing. So I'll give you an example. Missouri is one of the higher states. We have meat processors, with quite a few meat processing clients in Missouri and Kansas. And one of the things that we have been doing with our clients is looking at driver data and S-curls, because we realize in Missouri and Kansas, they have a lot of S-curls, and that's streets that go like this. And they're in the rural area, and they continually make an S. And there was at some point, there was some drunken sailor that designed the roads between Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa. Believe it or not, it's systemic. And so one of the studies that we did with one of our clients is we had fatalities on the S roads, with several fatalities with products in them. So we actually do kills on the S roads. So they basically can come into the S road. We figured out that our drivers will not have an accident if they're going lower than 35 miles an hour. So when they get there, the speed kills down to 30 miles an hour, because they cannot navigate a tractor trailer with a ton of product on the back of it through any of these S-curls. And so I don't think that the industry, and I'm right, I agree with you, Carey, the industry doesn't take that into consideration because they're not really looking at where people are going and what the inherent issues are in these little pockets of areas, and how that does not overlay with race or ethnicity or, you know, having a driver's license even. It's just the nature of that process. And so we found that out just by happenstance after having several fatalities in between Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And just from my clients that are in that Midwest region, that's what we did. And we ended up driving those roads because we couldn't figure out why our people were having accidents. So that's how even her data set can immediately apply in fleet operations in a risk management perspective.
And that's such a great thing that you're taking care of your customers in such a detailed way and getting on the road and saying, let me put myself literally behind the wheel that they drive. For insurers, it strikes me as one of those things that's also not hard to do, because we did the hard thing first. We put all of these devices on these vehicles and gave everybody the discounts to put these, apps on their phone. That's all, that hard work is already done. So to me, it just feels like it's teed up as an opportunity to keep people safer and understand who really is exposed, because otherwise our drivers are driving blind, and so are we.
Yeah. It's just interesting how you got to those states and it was like, okay, I've done this. This is the truth. It's one of the highest areas for truckers who have accidents in those tribes, like Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa basket.
Yeah. And I don't want to abuse the time, but one of the fun things we do with clients to help them understand the impact for their drivers is show them their neighborhood. And I can't tell you how many people it wins every sale where they say, yep, you know what, that is an unsafe road. And here's a road I didn't know was unsafe that's on my kid's high school route to school. Every time it's just bringing us insurers and those in the insurance community really to understand, again, the customer experience, in this case, behind the wheel.
Yeah.
So I see we have a question from Charlie, and this is for all the founders. What types of support does an InsurTech startup need from the innovation community that might be unique or different in other industries? So what kind of support do InsurTechs need that's unique to insurance?
I would say access. The door has to be open. Mm-hmm. Access is the key. Not only access, but a critical partnership that comes with that access. Because you can let me in the door, but you're not really a partner. Where if I need data, for example, or if I'm looking to figure out, really hone in on what your issues are so that I can, really materially change my product. For example, we do data dumps on claims history because we do a lot of trending. And so we will have to jump through hoops just to get people to give us their data dump. So it's one of those things where you just need that partnership and you need the access for me, anyway. That's my view.
Yeah, I think also awareness, right? You have to know you have a problem before you can take action to do anything about it. And Margaret, your comments about sort of how you had to put your pride behind the success of your business and put a white male at the front and at the table is testament to how all in you are, frankly. Like, I think about if I had to make that choice for myself, how hard it truly is. Like, if I can just have empathy for that decision, like I would have had a bottle of Jack Daniels there when I had to pull that trigger, because man, I'm like, that sucks. But if we're become aware, I think, you know, we've had this meeting is testament to the reality that everyone in insurance knows we have a diversity and inclusion problem. We have a panel at every conference I've ever been to, and I've sat on many of them, where we talk about the diversity and inclusion problem. I think where we're at, instead of maybe just focusing on hiring, instead of saying, oh, we hire a diverse group of people, we need to actually introspect and say, how has having had a very homogenous looking set of employees for the last 50 or 100 years manifest in the products that we create and how we serve our customers and how we understand our customers and how we serve them at the end of the day. So I think that awareness, now we're all sitting at home sort of reflecting on our role in the fight for social justice and whether institutionalized racism is pervasive in the way that we face the world and we as an industry interact with customers. And I say it somewhat jokingly, but I deeply believe that financial services is the institution in institutionalized racism. So we have a lot of work to do there. And I think access is one thing, but awareness about our role in perpetuating a future that is more inclusive and doesn't require me, the founder who is a white female, and my technical founder who is a Moroccan immigrant, that we can show up at the table and have the opportunities that Margaret opened the door for us on.
I would add, you know, like this foundation of relationships is something that's resonated across this conversation, and it is on two fronts. One, insurance, you know, before the COVID-19 world was all about the personal interactions and the relationships and honestly the friendships that we've built with our clients and our partners. And that human piece is integral. And so from our standpoint, there are communities and there are organizations that really have been tremendous value in just being able to build those bridges and facilitate that to a greater extent. NASRE's Reimagine program for startups in building off of the Startup Bootcamp Hartford InsurTech Hub's work, as well as Plug and Play, the contributions of Quesnay with connecting the startup community, in particular with InsurTech Connect. All of these have been pillars and foundations that have been integral. And we talked a little bit just on you know, how we find doors, right? Like being able to have those initial conversations. And so from that perspective, we definitely see the value of joint go-to-market approaches with our partners, you know, whether it's a digital contact center idea or, you know, a bridged offering of some capacity. The other piece is insurance innovation needs to impact the bottom line. So, I mean, this is the same across industries, right? But the difference is that in insurance, market growth, it has become a key perspective that is looking into exploring new opportunities of addressing it in the past 5-6 years. And so from that standpoint, being able to understand, you know, what part of the journey from, you know, a quoting standpoint all the way to underwriting and follow-up, where are those investments going to be made, and kind of drilling down on the specificity. That I think is integral, just to understand where each organization's focus is, because that's not necessarily, we're in customer experience. That is a very well-established industry trend that transcends insurance and financial services. But in some of the other spaces, focus on underwriting, for example, is not necessarily the focus for auto insurers. And so from that standpoint, educating and bringing that community together is incredibly valuable.
I've been covering insurance for 8 years, and I would say that probably every second or third interview I've done, somebody says, insurance is a relationship business. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. I'd be curious to know, as people, founders, maybe especially more for Carey and Sudha, who didn't come from the insurance industry, is it a challenge to just kind of break in? Do you feel like you're trying to break into a club? To build those relationships.
I think definitely, and I'll say this, that to a certain extent, this is across industries, but in insurance in particular, people truly value being heard and understood. So just like, we talk about being able to translate between how people might speak on their phone to how documents are written, so to speak, like insurance is an industry that appreciates others that are very well versed and experts in that field. So people who understand the nuances, because it is different, right? Like from a legislation standpoint, from the delivery, the interaction, like it's a completely different space. And there are certain aspects that are very unique. I mean, just the space of how many different players bridge together. The other piece that I think has definitely been very critical is meeting people in person. Some of our early clients, we didn't even meet them beyond video conference until our solutions were live. They were serving tens of thousands of customers. With insurance, being present and being in that boardroom definitely makes a difference. And so it's interesting how that culture is shifting, but that was definitely a critical facet of our interactions. And then from that standpoint, I will say that while there are different cultures and different faces that are in that room, we have always been very well resourced in the people and the expertise. And so from that standpoint, I was able to recognize, in fact, the respect and the value that we were able to garner from that standpoint.
I would add to that to say, I think when we first started out, we felt that, Kate, where you walk into a room and you feel like you don't fit in, right? You don't know who to talk to or where to stand or how to really interact until you get to know people a little bit. But I'd say at year 3 or so, I realized my own power and my own ability to create my own party and invite people to it. And I think that has been a very liberating experience for me to say, as a founder, I don't need to fit into the rules that are already defined. I can create them, and we're having a great time over here, right? We're helping businesses become more profitable. We're doing so in an ethically sustainable way. It's consistent with my values as well. So at some point, I think Sudha probably empathizes with this too a little bit, just knowing your personality, Sudha. You just take control of the room and you start to be the shepherd and not necessarily the sheep.
So Carey, I know you've got your golf course. I think that might be a good example here. Could you tell everybody about that and how you've used that?
Yeah, and so we launched a podcast called The Golf Course. It's golfcore.se, so easy to remember. And the reason I called it The Golf Course was that I felt like the golf course and insurance is this physical space where business conversations happen, but not everybody's always invited. It's exclusive. It's meant to facilitate those relationships and really build relationships that aren't, you know, hey, I'm trying to sell you something. Hey, I'm trying to buy something. It's how's your family, and, you know, how are you doing during COVID-19? It's that dialogue and that relationship. So I founded the Golf Course Podcast as a digital forum to invite more people who might not necessarily get that invitation onto the course or really know how to golf very well themselves. Great golf cart driver, not a great golfer myself. To really have a platform to share good ideas, to the point earlier about access and opportunity, you know, really just creating our own forum and creating our own party and inviting people to it because it's the right thing to do.
Very true. I'm gonna have to tune in. That sounds good. I want to turn our attention to a related topic. We've been talking about sort of diversity and inclusion on the incumbent side, obviously the challenges with fundraising. I guess as you're running a business, you know, hiring, you're trying to sell into the carriers, you're trying to market, build a brand. At the same time, you don't want to lose sight of what makes a successful business, right? Which is diverse thinking and inclusion. So how as a leader do each of you ensure that diversity and inclusion is not ignored as you scale up your business? So I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Margaret, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, so one of the big challenges that I have right now is 4 years ago when I started the Employee to CEO project, my goal was disrupting the lack of minorities in executive leadership within the industry. And that was the goal. And my goal was, my lofty goal was, you know, creating an opportunity for 5,000 women to be ready to go into the space and going through the work to do that. Then as I started talking to folks within the industry and really I was targeting within workers' comp because that's where my name is known most. I realized that the issue wasn't the women that we were encountering. The issue was the people who were managing and training and supporting them. So as I said to everyone before, my son is in tech. So when Jennifer called me, I was like, wow, okay. He and I have been talking through, you know, how do we fix this? How do we make this different? How do we change our view of how to reach this marketplace? So here's the thin fact. Women are paid 62 cents for every man in the industry. And we have lots of data set. It's very hard to get the data set, but we've, because it's segmented within financial services. And so you have to then begin to parse it out. Business and Insurance interviewed me a few weeks ago. The article came out on Monday about what I saw as the diversity issues within the industry itself. Part of the problem is that the industry does not accept that it has a problem in terms of diversity. So even when we as service providers are coming to the table with diverse teams, the industry itself is not accepting that it has a diversity problem, okay? The second half of it is the organization's view of diversity is putting a chief diversity officer at the top of their organization, sprinkling diversity in various places. And as we've worked with carriers, we find that a lot of the diverse people who could even have a technology mindset or want to move into this, they're sort of stuck in these low-rung roles, and the industry itself is quite happy having people in these low-rung roles for 25 years. No other industry has people in roles for 20 years and they never move. You know, you call in there the customer service rep. 20 years later, they're still the customer service rep because the issue is that they're building relationships. Nonsense. You put a permanent cap on someone and they're never going to move. So for me, what we're thinking through bringing forward to the industry is really a mindset shift. And I think that we can't just say that we're creating circles because we're in this circle that we've gotten into. This is a broad industry. We appointed a woman for the first time, Inga Beale, to CEO of Lloyd's of London. She's not CEO anymore. We have 4, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 5 women of the hundreds of thousands of insurance companies. We have 5 women, maybe 6. Maybe I could get to 10 because there may be some division presidents or whatever. But the C-level, the top person at the top of the room, 0. Within workers' comp, our third-party administrators are all controlled by men. There's not a woman in a leadership role in a third-party administrator within our industry. So these are just the fact patterns of what we're dealing with. And so when you come to the table as a vendor of color or a woman, that's the mindset that you already are entering the room with, a mindset of you are important, but you really don't matter, because we're never going to reflect that in our workplace. And it's the reality.
If I can
and
add,
I think I was just going to say, I think the more we tell stories about literally the numbers, so the ROI on every dollar that a woman founder raises, her return versus others, that women on the Fortune 500, the few that are there as CEOs, they outperform by 3x.
Right.
Diverse boards outperform. So I think the more that we start sharing those, it's just pure numbers, right? It's not even about, it's a nice thing to do. It's just good business, and it's good to kind of serve the customers that might look a little different. So
I think we have to move beyond just sharing the numbers, Jennifer, to be honest with you, Jen. We have to move beyond just sharing the numbers. I think that it is imperative that we come to this industry now in this air of social responsibility, and we shake this industry not only with the numbers, but with some clear demands for what we expect from the industry. I think we've given them a pass by giving them the numbers. As I said, I love the Lean In report. I gobble it up every time it comes out. That's the data set I'm working with. But what I said is we can continue to put the reports out. If nothing this year over year, we're doing nothing but putting a report out. So for me and for the work that I'm doing with the Employee to CEO project and the technology space that we plan to bring forward from there is I don't want to tell you your numbers anymore. I want to challenge you with some solid stuff. This is what you must do. And just as, I think it was Schwab or Morgan Stanley, one of these organizations said, we won't invest with you anymore if you don't have a woman on your board, if you don't have diversity, blah, blah. We've got to get to that place because the majority of consumers within this industry are women. Even married women, the husbands aren't the purchaser of the product. It's the woman that's buying the product. And so if we continue to not even allow women's voices to be heard in the industry or represented in the industry, and we do this number dance with them, they're never going to change. Brene Brown said it best, and then I'm going to stop on my soapbox. She said they own the stadium, they own the seats, they own the playing field, and we are asking for the crumbs. And until we stop asking for the crumbs and we start asking for the field and the seats and the stadium, we're never going to move this needle.
Margaret, I take that as our charge of this generation. I just sent out a VC email, keeping some VCs that we keep close touch with when we want to raise money soon, keeping them up to date. And MailChimp sent me, the click-through rate and some machine learning they did on the VCs that I had sent notes to. And I laughed out loud when it said, according to our machine learning, it looks like you're in the industry of insurance. I was like, way to go, MailChimp. And your target audience is 65% men aged above 35 years old. And I was like, nailed it. Like, I mean, it was incredible to see, to your point in the numbers, but you're absolutely right, Margaret. We need to show up to the table and negotiate for our equity and for good deals so that we can get the capital necessary to escalate the growth of our businesses, get to IPOs, get to unicorn status. The 11 women out of 262 founders, I mean, we've got to be placing bigger bets and more bets on those people.
Yeah, and I think Ryan, my colleague, actually just asked a very good question here. How could we actually hold the industry accountable for hitting these next milestones, like for taking action. And Margaret, as you pointed out, certain financial firms, they're no longer investing in, you know, non-diverse led companies and such, or even environmental focused companies. So what kind of accountability could we kind of set up? What kind of structure, milestones, actions?
Well, to an extent, we see significant movement of insurance and financial organizations investing in corporate social responsibility initiatives. And much of that today is still very siloed from their core business metrics. And so from that standpoint, if you are simply able to demonstrate the ROI potential, that there is significant lost business, because that is ultimately how the books are evaluated. And that in order to meet that from an ROI standpoint, it doesn't need to be mutually exclusive from being a principled organization. And so what we see in that standpoint is we're in the space of AI. And so oftentimes that involves how do we address and proactively ensure that experiences that we create limit bias and curate the data and manage those experiences to address what are the variables that should not even be considered. The other aspect is insurance, beyond the importance and gravitas given to the bottom line and ROI, insurance industry does look to InsurTech to provide a voice and to provide a snapshot of the most recent research, whether it is from a business trend standpoint, a customer demand standpoint, or from a technology inventory perspective. And so from that standpoint, just being able to be a thought leader in that space and communicating the principles and the impact and the value, whether that is purely from social and moral motivations or from business motivations, and being able to communicate that that is a bridge that we are able to deliver on is pretty important. I mean, I think the InsurTech ecosystem has grown significantly in the past several years itself. And so insurance does look to InsurTech for that leadership. And so from that standpoint, again, just being that voice is significantly impactful. And I speak to this from experience, just in terms of the number of conversations that we have, just being able to share our expertise and share our perspectives with organizations and have that heard.
Thinking about the accountability, I wonder if the pressure to increase diversity within insurance and increase those minority leadership roles within the organization will come from the outside. And I say this thinking more along the lines of commercial insurance. When a large company buys insurance, they're often will only buy from an insurer who has an A financial rating. I know this because that's what AM Best does. We provide financial ratings, and that rating is very important for an insurance, a purchaser of insurance. Now, if that customer also starts to say, okay, I want an insurance company that has an A rating, and I want an insurance company with these diversity metrics met, I think that could be something that could change the dynamic.
And this has been a conversation in the reinsurance community too, just in terms of how those organizations are communicating their investment portfolios to capture that very attentive audience right now that is become much more aware and attracted to aspects of diversity and inclusion, particularly given where the world is today.
I'd love to circle back for a second to something that Carey mentioned earlier about the redlining. I think we've all been highly sensitized, especially right now, to thinking about the worlds we operate in and looking for the areas of inequality that exist that's, maybe we hadn't noticed because they hadn't applied to us. So just thinking about insurance and redlining, and can you think of some other areas within the insurance industry where we've had this institutionalized bias that maybe people didn't realize we had, or people within the industry hadn't really thought about? You say, oh, I think of zip codes and I think maybe your car is less likely or more likely to be stolen from a particular zip code. But then to your point, zip codes have been controversial. So can you think of some other examples or additional examples where we have this bias within the industry that we should be looking at or thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I know auto very well, but I might open it up to Margaret and Sudha to add examples from outside of auto, because I can go all day on auto. It's definitely in the auto space. And I think the reason it's perpetuated, if for no other reason, I mean, I've been to, ITC and these events where our competitors, namely LexisNexis Risk Solutions and Verisk ISO, their advertisements are, why go with a new startup when you could go with us? Literally, that's their intentional marketing. And I think that complacency and that like secure position of we'll just do what we've always done has perpetuated perhaps some of the metrics that do have that implicit bias and allowed us to remain with our eyes closed, because we've got a great partner who is always there for us, who delivers a really high quality service. And no insult to them, but I think there may be better ways to do it. It just takes a interest and a focus and an intentionality around trying to do new things that service different people in a better way. So I would punt your question though to Margaret and Sudha, because auto I know like the back of my hand.
So it permeated throughout the insurance industry is varying forms of racism and discrimination. So let's start with property casualty. That is another zip code driven area where you're purchasing homeowners insurance, and it is also based on zip code, clearly cannot be underwritten any other way. It is just, what's your zip code? What's your risk? Where's the risk within that? And so there you are. You tunnel down now to business insurance. Again, it's zip code driven. It's also industry driven. It's also years in business. So if I'm a brand new African American or Latino, or I'm a new business owner starting out, my workers' comp, my business liability, my property insurance is going to be way higher. It's going to be tiered based on my experience in business, because again, when you send out the underwriting portfolios on the application process, you ask the questions, how long have you been in business? Are you a new business? What is the owner's experience? Underwriters will then ask for the owner's resume in order to get that. And of course, when you get my resume, you now have my demographic information, which really, when you think about it from a privacy standpoint, we then begin to now add subjectivity to it. When you come down now into workers' compensation, which is where we are now responsible for administering a state law within an insurance product, you have sheer discrimination around how access to care is given, whether we believe that the person's actually injured or not, whether we think that the Latino person who is working in a meat processor actually got COVID-19 from that processor, or whether we think that the healthcare that's given to them is worthy, or you will get information within the impairment rating process, which is a part of the how do you get, if so, for example, if I lose a finger, how do I get an impairment rating for that finger so that the insurance company compensates me for that body being lost, part being lost? Again, you go to impairment rating guides, which are built around race, gender, ethnicity. So it will say to you, a woman age 35, does she have this diagnosis, and what is this diagnosis, and so on and so forth. And then you get a rating not based on whether I have a true issue, but whether or not I'm a woman 35 with blah, 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 blah. So, so you could actually begin to dissect every portion of this industry and see not only the front end, how we purchase policies, the middle end, how we access the policies around what Sudha is talking about, but also on the other end, which is how we treat people within the space. Here's a bigger example. Return to work post-injury was never a thing prior to probably 1990. Okay, when somebody got injured, they were excluded from the workforce immediately, and the workers' comp system allowed that person to get a settlement check. The price of, you would give up a job for the price of a pickup truck, basically. Right? And the more people that got injured and the more people that got settled out of the system were more Black and brown people. So when I came into the industry and said, we're going to do return to work, and started really pushing it, and I created this National Return to Work Week, and we brought it into the Workers' Comp Institute, and we forced this messaging and thing around return to work. Now organizations are bringing people back and keeping them gainfully employed, because only 2 states say, you can't terminate me for having an injury. The others allow it to happen by law. Wow. So those are the ways that systemically within the industry that we create blinders, but the end result is generally a person of color.
Wow.
I didn't mean to take up all the time.
No. This is, I mean, it's so insightful, really. I'm getting so many positive comments here on the right-hand side saying, just really enlightening, I think, this conversation for a lot of people. So appreciate everyone's candor and just engagement. I know that we're past our time. I can't believe how quickly this hour and a half went by. It's amazing. I do want to invite the audience to continue to network with our panelists. I put a link in the chat, and we really want to thank everyone for their engagement, our incredible panelists for being here, and Margaret, Carey, Sudha, and then Kate, thank you for co-moderating a terrific discussion. And I'm happy to follow up as well with, with anyone to continue the conversation and offer help, right? So part of what we want to do is help other women, other founders in the industry, have an impact. So do reach out. I know Carey, you're going to raise a round soon. Margaret, Sudha, let us know, let the ecosystem know, the Northeast InsurTech Alliance, and we'd love to help you scale up.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank
Kate,
you.
And we appreciate this opportunity. It's been an awesome conversation. Have a great one, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Have a good weekend. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Jennifer, and to all of you. It was very enlightening.
Poor Bill with his internet connection. I think we got it. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, we got it. Take care, everyone. Take care.
Thanks all.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.